Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Candice Curry, and she started a blog with probably about 60 followers, and she wrote this incredible letter that went viral. And after that, her ministry and her life went through the stratosphere. She's also an author, speaker, and a contributor to the Huffington Post. Her book is entitled The Con Man's Daughter, a story of lies, desperation, and finding God. Candice, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining, and thank you for having the courage to write this book. Now, the book really talks about your life, and it's a story of you growing up and living a life of really deception. And that deception happens through your father, who is literally what you write in the book as a con man. Why did you decide to tell this story at this time in your life?
I think that this was God's timing. And he led me to write the book because I feel like we're so worried about what people are going to think about how we've grown up, our story, our past, what we've done, what's been done to us. And so I wanted to just say, like, we're all kind of messy. And we all have a story. God's never going to let pain in our life go to waste. And so he used all the pain in my life and everything I had gone through, everything I had done myself or had been done to me. And he used it to kind of glorify who he is and what he can do and what happens when Jesus comes into our life. And so I wrote it just to say, hey, we can all come to Jesus with dirt on our feet and he's going to wash them and use it for his glory.
Wow. And so throughout your life, you made a real effort to hide who you were and your life. I mean, like, you write about it very clearly. Your dad would come to the school and it might be a stolen car, or he might give you a gift and, it might have been stolen. And so you're looking at all of these people around you who live a quote unquote normal life, and you didn't have that. When did you get past the shame, I guess, to really talk openly and shame the devil and tell the truth?
It was well into my adulthood. I would have never revealed kind of like how we were different as a teenager. And it wasn't maybe until I became a mom and I kind of understood what I don't know how to explain it, but I had shame as who I was as a child because it was embarrassing, and I didn't want to be the outcast or people to know how crazy things were. But when I took control of my own life and I became a mother and I kind of empowered myself and stole my story from the devil, because the devil, if you continue to let him use it, well, he will. Right. And so when I said, nope, I'm going to own it, and if I tell people about it, then he can't work his devil magic or whatever against me anymore. He can't use my story to hurt me. So I'm going to use my story to glorify God. And so it took well into adulthood.
And so on the story, you take us on an odyssey that really feels like a movie. And your mom was the one in the house who worked and who provided that stability. And really then you write about your brother, who really became a man probably way before he needed to. So when you have all of these nuances going on in the family, and dad is sort of doing his thing and mom is working to create that stability, what is she saying about what it is that you all are seeing and not understanding?
I don't think there was ever a conversation. I think she just tried her best to keep a normal. I mean, she was a hard worker and attended every school event. I think she just kept her side as normal as possible for us. I want to say to offset his crazy in a way, but it was never like a sit down discussion. She just worked very hard to normalize our lives in spite of him.
And I think for the purpose of this book and this conversation, we have to realize that there is no condemnation. Every family has something. And this just happens to be your family's story. But one of the things that you write about in the book is that your dad, on many occasions, pretended to be a lawyer, and somehow he had that silver tongue that he could talk anybody into anything. And you write about how sometimes you guys would go to the lake home, but you didn't even know whose house it was.
Oh, that was several times. I mean, we had a ranch house and we had a lake house and we had cars and, we would move into places and truly they were never ours. And
But
he would just,
didn't y'all find something unusual about that?
sure. So he would tell us that he was doing bankruptcy work for somebody. And we knew kind of what bankruptcy was. So you don't really have money to pay your lawyer if you're going bankrupt. And so they would exchange him these things. So in exchange for his work, we would get the lake house, or in exchange for work, we would get the cars. And so that was kind of our understanding at that. And, in middle school and early high school, we didn't. Now I know, like, nobody's going to give me a lake house to do work.
Did anybody, like, in your sphere or your school, did anybody sort of question what's really going on with your family?
No.
Never.
Never. No one. And now the people that have been very close to me growing up, and they'll read the book and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I'm like, really? You didn't? I sometimes just thought people knew we were kind of odd and my dad did shady stuff, but they didn't. And that's weird to me because I thought it was very obvious.
And so with your brother having, your dad was gone a lot, but, and you say, like, he would leave you guys sort of to your own devices.
Yes.
And mother was working. Did you start to see the effects of him being your protector? Did that start to wear on him? We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk more about that, and we'll talk about how God can use the foolish things to confound the wise. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Candice Curry. Her book is entitled The Con Man's Daughter, A Story of Lies, Desperation, and Finding God. And before we went to break, I was talking about your brother and him, both of you, growing up way too fast, and even your mother growing up way too fast. She was a teen bride trying to create this family that just had a bunch of challenges. But your brother, in your dad's absence of, I'll just call it hustling, because he just felt like a hustler. And your mom working so hard to provide for the family in the dad's absence and yet presence, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so your brother is now the man of the family, and he is your protector. And so you write in the book that there was a situation where your parents were arguing, you all were afraid, and your brother gets the gun. And you are very clear how steady he points the gun and he says, if he hits mom, I'm going to kill him. Talk about what that does to the soul of children.
Well, he always protected me in little tiny ways and in big ways. And I was his little baby. I remember my mom always tells me when she brought me home, she kind of gave me to him and said, here's your baby. And so he had protected me from then on. And that day, my dad wasn't ever physically abusive. And so this incident that we're talking about in the book is wildly out of norm because he was never abusive. He was mentally abusive, never physically. So
why do you think your brother, with that said, why do you think he took such a hard stand in that moment?
Because I think my brother had it. I think this was his tipping point. I think we all had tipping points when it came to my dad, and this was his tipping point. I think he was exhausted and he was fed up, and he had so much anger built up inside him towards my dad that he almost like, I dare you to hit her so I can end this, Mm-hmm. And I just remember being calm about it because I trust my brother, I think, more than I've trusted anybody. And so when my brother said, this is how it's going to go, or this is what we need to do, I I said, okay. I fully trusted him. And I think it was his tipping point.
And so in the book, you write about always this hope of your dad being a better man and being the man and the dad that you want him to be. How were you able to reconcile that?
I did not reconcile that until my dad passed away. I had hope until the day he died that he was going to, and maybe not change. I had hope that he was going to change, but in the later years, I had, and this is going to sound so strange, but I had hope that he would get too old to care for himself and I would have to take care of him.
Wow.
And that would be where the redemption came in. And that would where we would heal. I just always pictured that I was going to take care of him. And that would be me loving on him because I couldn't love on him up until this point. But when he passed away, that was all stolen. And I think that's the only thing I can't reconcile with his death is that he stole the opportunity for me to heal through taking care of him.
And while he was alive.
While he was alive, I had hope. I know he wouldn't have changed. I couldn't lose hope because I couldn't be hopeless about my own dad. But I also had to make sure I had high boundaries for my family. If it wasn't for my kids and my husband, I would have continued to fall into his trap just to be in his life, just to have my dad and have some sort of relationship with him because I craved him so desperately. But for my family's sake, I knew there had to be a barrier up.
And your dad's lying, cheating, and stealing was so bad that at a point he would send a friend, and this friend would pick you up, and this friend became your friend. But you could really feel as the reader in the book that this friend is nobody's friend, that he's really grooming you. Talk about that friend.
He was, I don't even know how he and my dad met. They were very much two peas in a pod. They're very similar. They're far apart in age. The man is much closer to my age. And I don't know. I can't say for sure that my dad was involved in the grooming process. I truly believe that he was. I think it was.
You think your dad was involved in the grooming process?
Yes, I do. Why would I, as a mother of 5 daughters now, there's no way I would allow a man that I knew was the way he was to go pick up my daughters for any reason whatsoever. And he knew how this man was, and he would let him go. I mean, he would call the school and allow this man to come pick me up. You know, why would he do that? And so I didn't see it as grooming because I didn't know what grooming was at 16.
No.
And as 16 is a child.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of just went along with it. He was my friend. He had never given me cause for concern. I knew that he was a bad person. I knew in his life outside of me, people feared him and stuff, but he never treated me that way. So I truly thought that we were friends. I didn't understand grooming. Now I can look back at it and it's just clear as day, you know?
And so then there was a time where the grooming turned to really assault.
Yes. Sexual abuse at 16. And I'm not sure how long, I really can't recall how much time led up to this, few months. And just this day that it happened, I think it was almost the perfect storm for him, obviously not for me, but to where it ended up that there was a sexual assault. And that was the moments after that are what truly separated me from my father, because my father knew about it and sided with my abuser.
Wow. But you didn't tell your brother.
No, I didn't tell anybody. As a matter of fact, my mother didn't know about it until she read the book.
Wow. And so why did you make a decision? Because you and your brother were two peas in a pod, and he was your protector. Why did you make the decision not to tell him?
He would have killed him. I mean, I think that he would have completely unhinged on my father and this man. And my brother at the time was 18 and at college, and my brother was going through a lot up in college because of my dad. And so I it was my way of protecting my brother, to keep it from him. And maybe that's the only time I've ever been the protector. The roles were reversed, and that was something I felt I really needed to do.
How did you deal with the pain of being sexually assaulted by somebody that you knew and really trusted?
I completely blocked it out for a long time. I think that's like when I started destroying relationships in my life, especially with men or boys, at that time I was 16. But I had very little self-worth after that, and that was my struggle for a long time. But I very much buried the pain of it, because it's something, unless you're going to go and, it's not something you handle by yourself very well,
right?
Unless you internalize it. And so I internalized it for many, many years.
Wow. When did you first speak of it?
I think like the first person I ever discussed it with was one of my very best friends, who ironically is now married to my brother. But I can't even remember like initial conversation, but I know that she is non-judgmental of me and accepting of all flaws, and she was kind of a mess at some point. So we very much had this bond of understanding, and so I could talk to her about that and trust her with it.
Wow. Let's get a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk about how God came into Candice's life and turned it all around. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Candice Curry, and she has the courage and the heart to really share her story in order to hopefully strengthen women and families. The book is entitled The Con Man's Daughter. It's a story of lies, desperation, and finding God. And so through all of this odyssey that is your life, there wasn't a whole lot of God, or no God at all, involved in that. Talk about how that changes for you.
Well, I think, now that I look back, there was a lot of God involved. I just didn't know, and I didn't accept, and I didn't believe. But definitely now looking back, he very much took care of me. But in my later in life, I started going to church because of my daughter.
Uh-huh.
And I think he just started doing his work in there, because
Absolutely.
God's not going to ignore your heart ever.
You wrote in the book, not to cut you off, Candice, and it touched my heart. You wrote in the book, you said something like, like God didn't know you, and you wanted to call on him, but you didn't think that he would hear people like you. And I thought, my, how our small minds
Sure.
think about our great God.
Well, I just had this perception that church people had their lives together, and that's who God knew. The families of 4 that were dressed nice for church and ate dinner together, and all the stuff that we have been programmed to think is perfection. I thought only God knew them, and so there's no way he would spend any of his time on someone as messed up as me. Mm-hmm. And so why am I going to call out to him if he doesn't know who I am? That was my view of things.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand the difference between religion and relationship. And I didn't know that you could have a relationship. I didn't know that. I thought just religion was what God was.
Right.
And I started learning that it's about a relationship.
Sure. And then your life moves forward, and not without some hiccups and some pitfalls, but you sort of get past that point, and you move into a second marriage where you have a child, and then you all are conceiving again, and you're pregnant. And tell us how that pregnancy probably changes your life, I guess, forever.
Well, when we told my daughter that we were going to try to get pregnant, and my daughter said, I'm going to pray for a baby. And so she said, God, please put a baby in my mommy's tummy. And we just kind of, laughed it off, whatever. Mm-hmm. It was a silly little prayer. we got pregnant. We went to our first appointment, and they did the sonogram, and they could not find heartbeats. And I say heartbeats because there was two sacs. And so
But
we
you
believed
didn't
it was-
know that did you know that at the time that you were at the doctor's?
Oh, no. We just went for a normal checkup,
Mm-hmm.
First checkup in the pregnancy. And they said, oh, well, there's two sacs. So you have twins, but there's no heartbeats. And so they told us that we needed to go home for a week, schedule an appointment to have everything taken out, a DNC done. And so we were miscarrying twins. And I have to say that's like the most trying time probably in my life, and lonely, and very emotional. And I didn't think anybody could understand what I was going through. And so we went home for a week. And
Do
I
you and
literally
Brandon
just
have
stayed
a
in
conversation about how to proceed during that
it.
time?
We did when we went back for our checkup to have everything removed, they did another sonogram. And in that sonogram, they found 3 heartbeats. And so we ended up being pregnant with triplets. The first appointment, we were just too early on to detect the heartbeats. And so they said, well, you're pregnant with triplets. And they called us into a room, and this doctor, this is the first time I'd ever met this doctor, sat us down and discussed selective reduction with us, which means he wanted me to essentially abort one of the babies to give the other ones a chance. And in that moment, I thought, we have gone through all this. I've been sitting for a week begging for healing and hope and all this kind of stuff. And now that I have 3, like, I thought I was miscarrying twins, and now I have 3 babies, and you're asking me to essentially abort one of them, was a moment of clarity for me that I had to have bigger faith in something than this doctor, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I couldn't, there was no way we were going to do selective reduction. So we literally got up and walked out and went to my normal doctor, which I should have gone to in the first place. And we had very healthy triplets, abnormally healthy triplets.
5 pounds each.
5.5 pounds each. Yes. And they were born at 35 weeks. We had little to no health issues. And so that was kind of like a moment. I mean, of course that's a moment. Triplets is huge in itself, but for me to like trust in God and that he put this in and he was going to handle it and not the medical doctor, that was huge for me. And I'm so thankful because I have amazing, healthy triplets, but I think that was a huge turning point.
And so at that point, do you look to God and say, and because you were begging God and you were saying to God that if he would allow these children's survival and their health, that you would essentially give your life to him?
Yes. And I held my word to that. However, it took time. I wish I could say that I had these babies and it was like, oh, okay, here, I'm giving my life to Christ. But infant triplets was hard. It was a bigger trial than the pregnancy. It was financially, emotionally, physically exhausting. And so I did start going to church in that period, and I did start a Bible study, and I kind of started doing these things, but I won't just like say that, oh yeah, I gave my life to Christ, because I didn't. I still had doubts, and we were still kind of messy.
You still had doubts though after you thought that these twins, you thought that they were, but then they're triplets and they're more than healthy. They're almost to term babies. Did you not see were you not able to see at that moment the miraculousness of what happened versus what could have happened?
Oh no, I didn't doubt God's miracles. I doubted myself. It was not me doubting God. It was whether I was worthy of God. So I knew he was there. I knew this was all him. But how am I, I'm still making a mess of what he gave me, basically. And so I almost was ashamed to come to him because I wasn't living up to what he had done for me.
Right. And don't you think, though, Candice, that's the mistake that we all make? We think that we have to clean ourselves up or we have to be a certain thing to come to God when it's the polar opposite.
polar opposite. And that's what I like. Truly, I think the core of the book is saying, I thought I had to be something better than I was for God to accept me. And that's not how it works. You come to God as messy as you are. And I always say that I came to God with dirty feet and he washed my feet. I thought all along I had to wash my feet before I got to him. But even in the Bible, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. And so that is always a picture for me, that I can come to him with dirty feet and I can just imagine him kneeling down before me and cleaning my feet for me.
Indeed. It's an incredible story. It's a great book, and I believe that so many people are going to be blessed by it and have the courage to come out of their shame and share their own stories. Candice, thank you so much for the book, The Con Man's Daughter, A Story of Lies, Desperation, and Finding God. Before you got to go, tell us about your blog site, how people can connect, how they can get the book, and how they can connect with you.
My blog is CandiceCurry.com, and you can get any information on that site. I'm on Candice Curry W3 on Facebook, and my book is Barnes & Noble's, Amazon. You can go to my site, CandiceCurry.com, and it'll show all the places you can get the book.
There you go. Candice, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this.